What is up, Japan Ballers, and welcome to another edition of the Japan Baller Weekly Spotlight. As always, I'm your host, Andy Payton, and this week I'm joined by the Japanese baseball globetrotter, Gabe Lerman. Gabe, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, letting me lead off this batting lineup of Japan Ball fans.
So, Gabe, why don't you tell the Japan Ballers a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do, and who your favorite NPB team is?
Sure thing. I'm based out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, rep in the hometown. So my MLB team favorite is, of course, the Toronto Blue Jays. By day, I'm an IT consultant working for IBM Canada. But in my spare time, I've become something of a Japanese baseball aficionado, and I'm slowly becoming an ambassador slash nut bar for the sport. I've actually started Japanese lessons to start to be able to speak the language a little bit more and read it better. I just guested on the Hanshin Tigers English News podcast last week. Be sure to check that out. And about last year in spring, I visited all 12 NPB teams by train over 17 days. So I think that establishes my bona fides pretty well. In terms of favorite team, my principle is whichever team you sit in the outfield bleachers for first becomes your ride or die squad. And in my case, it's the Hanshin Tigers.
So, like many people who are fans of the Japan Ball website, you do not live in Japan, but as you mentioned, you live in Toronto, Canada. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you first found out about the Japanese Baseball League and how you became such a big fan?
For that, I blame my best friend Nick. He lived in Japan for 2 years from 2013 to 2015. And my first visit to see him in August of 2013, we decided to tack on a Japanese baseball game. We went to see the Chiba Rotte Marines host the Tohoku Rakuten Golden Eagles at Zozo Marine Stadium in Chiba. That game went to extra innings. Satozaki, the catcher, walked it off with a sayonara home run, and we were absorbed by the fan atmosphere. And you know that the Chiba Rotte Marine fans out in the right field bleachers are absolute nutters, maybe the best in the Pacific League. The second time I visited Japan was in 2015, again to visit Nick. We took in 2 games this time, one at the Tokyo Dome between the Yomiuri Giants and the Chunichi Dragons, and the second at Hanshin Koshien Stadium between the Hanshin Tigers and the Hiroshima Toyo Carp. That was the game we sat in the outfield bleachers for. And as you can imagine, getting absorbed into that atmosphere, even if the home team lost, was intoxicating. Aside from the alcohol, anyway. So he put the bug in my ear about 5 years ago that you could, conceivably, visit all 12 Japanese baseball teams only by train. And it took a lot of frequent flyer mile collecting, frequent sleeper point collecting, and a lot of trip planning in order to pull off what I call the All Japan Great Baseball Train Tour, or Zen Nihon Daiyakyu Densha Ryoko. I hope that's translated properly.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that tour? Like, what made you decide to go on a tour of all 12 Japanese ballparks? Like, I know you told me you've only really been a fan of the Japanese League for about 2 years, so that's a pretty big turn right there.
Well, I'd done, visit all teams in one swoop by train before. Back in 2014, I visited all 6 original NHL cities, all by train, and a bus under the Windsor River to get from Windsor to Detroit. So I'd always had that urge to travel and see sports in other locales. And having been to Japan twice before and really enjoyed the culture, the food, oh my goodness, and how easy it was to get around, it seemed like a no-brainer. And really, ultimately, it came down to no one had before, someone should, and I could.
Well, that's awesome. So having the opportunity to go to all these different ballparks, do you have any cool souvenirs or merchandise that you have from all these different teams?
Sure do. I'm a hats guy, and I made sure to pick up a hat from every single team I visited when I was on the go. I made sure to wear the home hat at every stadium I went to, and I actually used them on my wall. I have a little hat rack where I stack these things in the order of the NPB standings and post it on my Twitter. Most of these hats are from Selection J in Shinjuku. I highly recommend them for all your NPB sporting needs. They carry some MLB stuff too, with a couple from the team stores and one from my previous trip to Japan.
So What role do you believe that Japan Ball has played in connecting you to the Japanese Baseball League while you haven't been able to go to Japan and travel to these ballparks due to coronavirus?
Well, the Japanese baseball world is small, especially in the English world. In English speaking, Japanese baseball fandom is small. We're a tight knit group, and it's always great to be able to connect to other people who adore the sport as much as I do. I assure you, I am probably the only person in Toronto, maybe even all of Canada, who strolls around town wearing a Rakuten Golden Eagles or Oryx Buffaloes hat every now and again. So it's finding your tribe and getting the chance to connect with like-minded individuals and to do so in real time. There's always the NPB subreddit, which I'm a participant in, but that's not the same as direct communication, and especially the opportunities for Q&A sessions and exclusive interviews like Japan Ball has been able to put together with former players, executives, scouts, and authors like they have over the last 6 months.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Gabe. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.